Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
So wide you can't get around it.
So low you can't get under it.
So high you can't get over it.
Can't get over it.
Ready or not, it's Thanksgiving, kids. Didn't that year go by nice and fast? Well, here we are. Your fantasy football season is coming to a close. It is week 12. You most likely have this and one more week of your regular season left. And Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com and myself are here to help guide you through this tumultuous time. Jim, happy pre-Thanksgiving. Turkey Day -1, we'll call it.
Keith, happy Thanksgiving. How are you, buddy?
I'm freaking-tastic. This is great. Just real quick before we get into these games, in my league, there's literally like 4 teams out of 12 that are still vying. They're within one game of that final playoff spot. Do you find that a lot in your leagues, or is it pretty much 1 or 2 teams that are still in contention?
For the final spot, yeah, I think there's roughly 4. I think in all my leagues there's like 4 teams trying to get in that final spot. But it also seems to me we've got in most of my leagues a few teams that are just like killing it, and then everybody else.
Right.
There's certainly teams 2 wins or 1 win, but even the teams that are vying for that final spot, they're hovering around 500. Some actually have losing records today, and will likely get in 7 and 6. And who knows? In some leagues, the team could get in 6 and 7. So, it's interesting how sort of things have kind of worked themselves out. But man, even if you're a good team, if you pull the wrong matchups in a given week, and the other team gets the right ones, you can still lose.
And that is why we're here, because time is of the essence.
It really is.
So you got 2 regular season weeks left, and we are going to go through every matchup, with exception of the Thursday night matchups, because all that information is available at thefantasygreek.com. Head over there, check out the matchups, get yourself hooked up with a Skybox membership, get all the up-to-date inside info as we head towards a very pivotal Sunday in fantasy football. So, but we are going to make our picks for Thursday, and the games we have there are leading off with the Eagles at the Lions, the Panthers at the Cowboys, the Bears at the Packers. The Eagles are a dysfunctional mess, starting off with that first game, the Eagles at the Lions. Mark Sanchez figures to be under center. Detroit, while they are just as dysfunctional, they're on an uptick in my book. And while they're not going to all of a sudden make a run back to contention or save Jim Caldwell's job, I think they're good enough to beat the Eagles in this game. I'm picking the Lions.
Yeah, I'm taking the Lions too, and I think the big reason I'm taking them is their defense has really come on since they came out of the bye week. I don't even think, and I'll double check this, but I don't even think they've given up 20 points in a game. Yeah, they're just playing really great defense. Their offense isn't, it's not what we thought it would be at the beginning of the season. But certainly it's been playing a little bit better, and it's a really favorable matchup for their offense. So come on out to the fantasygreek.com. The game preview is right there on the homepage. It'll tell you all our recommended starts and sits and sort of the players that are in the middle that have risks, and we'll tell you one way or the other whether you should play them. And really, what you're seeing in these fantasy game previews that we've put on the homepage is what all our Skybox members get for all 256 games. Their magazine quality, and obviously it just doesn't tell you who to start sit, but it tells you why. And, please sign up for Skybox after you check them out. We've given you 3, and they're all really solid. So,
in the 2 games since their bye week, the Lions have played the Green Bay Packers and the Oakland Raiders, and they have indeed only given up 16 and 13 points, respectively, to 2 pretty good offenses.
Yeah, 2 really good offenses, actually. Yeah. Up until the last couple of weeks, the Raiders were just on fire. Now they seem to have hit a wall, and only last week did the Packers finally emerge from whatever slumber it is that they've been in for the last several weeks. It's been driving their fan base crazy.
Mm-hmm. Just in time to face the Bears. Yay.
Yeah.
We'll get to them in a second. The second game on the docket is the Carolina Panthers at the Dallas Cowboys, the undefeated Panthers. The Cowboys facing really a lost season. Tony Romo's injury just totally decimated any hopes this franchise had of returning to the playoffs, in my opinion. No, the book is not closed. But on the upside, the Cowboys have rejuvenated Darren McFadden's career. But I'm picking the Panthers, and very simply, they are undefeated for a reason. They have not given me any reason to not pick or to pick against them, rather. And as good as the Cowboys are with Romo and Bryant and almost everything seeming back to normal, I'm just not picking against the undefeated team.
And I'm not either. I mean, you have to give credit to the Cowboys defense, which has played extremely well when Tony Romo has not been around, and has done a great job keeping him in games. Now that he's back, I mean, I think that sort of tips the gamut in favor of the Cowboys in most games. And indeed, had Romo been around these last, but it was 7 straight they lost, they would have probably won at least 4 of those. But now they're going up against a Panthers team that they win they don't just win in the passing game, they win in the running game, they win on defense. I mean, one way or another, they're going to find a way, I think, to win this game. Could it be close? Yes. But I'm not going against the undefeated team either, and they have one of the top 5 defenses, in my opinion, in the league.
Plus 13 takeaway differential on the season first. That's just nutty.
That's crazy.
Just nutty. And then the nightcap, the Chicago Bears travel to the Green Bay Packers. Word today that Martellus Bennett will not play for the Bears. Eddie Royal is also out. So that means that it's Alshon Jeffrey, Jay Cutler, and maybe possibly the return of Matt Forte. So Cutler and the Cutlets will go up to Green Bay to take on Aaron Rodgers in his home turf in prime time. It just doesn't bode well. The Bears don't play the Packers well in prime time, and with those 2 offensive weapons out, even though Eddie Royal has not been on the field much this year, if Jay Cutler doesn't have more than one viable weapon, you see what you saw last week against the Broncos. Just struggles, mediocre to say the least. I'm picking the Packers.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head in the game preview, which is, the Bears are beat up. If they were a healthier team, I think this could be a different game as far as all their playmakers except for one. That's Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler's history against these guys is terrible. Come check out the game preview. I've got a link to show you what his history has been against these guys. It is no good. Can he throw for 2 TDs? Absolutely, but it's not. It's a rarity compared to how he generally does. So, but I like them to put up a passing touchdown, at least one rushing touchdown, and keep the game somewhere around a touchdown.
Yep, they played them tough in Week 1 earlier, and they're a much better team than they were in Week 1. The Bears.
Well, in the defense, I mean, very quietly, they've become an even better defensive team because they're shutting down teams in the red zone.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. All right, so that means we start the fun here, kids, with the first of the Sunday afternoon games, and that would be the Minnesota Vikings at the Atlanta Falcons. The Vikings are sitting at 7-3, tied with the Packers for first place in the NFC North. The Atlanta Falcons 6-4, and a god-awful loss against the Indianapolis Colts last week at home. If you want to take the Falcons seriously, if you're a Falcons fan and you want everybody to take your team seriously, that game last week is a game you absolutely have to win. With Matt Hasselbeck starting for the Colts, sure, he's a veteran, but there were some plays where he looked god-awful, and the Falcons just unable to pull away, solve their defense, losing 24-21. 10 fourth quarter points scored for the Colts, a goose egg for the Falcons in the fourth quarter at home. That just can't happen. The Vikings last week lost to the Packers pretty soundly at home, 30-13, and that old Packers offense found it late. It was close up until the fourth quarter. Outscored 11-0 in the fourth quarter. The Vikings were. The Vikings play pretty good defense. Teddy Bridgewater is what he is. He's a second-year quarterback. He's not real flashy. He's smart. Usually takes care of the football. And with the Falcons, yes, they're home, but if the Colts, who are suspect as all get out, can come in there and pull off the upset, well, you know what? I'm going to pick the Vikings to do the same this week.
I'm going to take the Vikings too. I think you hit a couple things right on the head. And if you're a Falcons fan, the biggest problem I think that the Falcons have might well be Matt Ryan. I mean, here they come. They come out of a bye week, which to me suggests they should have won that game because they had 2 weeks to prepare for the Colts. And they certainly knew about Matt Hasselbeck. There was no secret there. And yet, they lose Devonta Freeman early in the game, and all they're left with is Julio Jones. The team is sort of a one-trick pony. I mean, offensively, that's not what should happen. Leonard Hankerson should step up. Roddy White is doing nothing this season. And, I'll have to admit I haven't spent time watching, what he's doing on the field, whether or not he's open and Ryan's just not throwing to him. But you got to have more than 2 playmakers on offense in the NFL. And until that happens, they're going to go up against a team like the Vikings that, yes, they lost last week, but prior to that, one of the best defenses in the league. Are they top 5? No. Are they top 12? Probably. And I have a hard time viewing that game any differently than you do. And in fact, I think to the extent that the Falcons, their rush defense is pretty good, they're allowing just like 87 yards a game, but then a boatload of points through the air, which suggests that Adrian Peterson, if they don't involve him in the passing game, the Vikings are really doing a disservice. But in those kinds of games, it forces Teddy Bridgewater to throw the football a little bit more. If they can shut down Adrian Peterson a little bit, that means I like Stephon Diggs as a wide receiver 3 with upside. Teddy Bridgewater I would sort of shy away from because the game could go either way for him, 1 or 2 TDs. Adrian Peterson is a must start just because of his versatility. And I think you could start the Vikings defense if you had to, but they're more of a borderline kind of play in 10 and 12 team leagues. For the Falcons, Julio Jones must start. Devonta Freeman, if he's healthy, must start. If Devonta Freeman does miss this game because of his concussion, suddenly Tevin Coleman steps up. But, I don't know how much of a play he's worth against the Vikings rush defense that 110 yards on the ground they allow. Not bad. But 5 TDs on the season, So Coleman probably moves up into an RB2, but you might even have a better bench player ahead of him that you could play. But outside of Julio Jones, I mean, Matt Ryan is not – I'm not walking around uber confident about him this week.
All right.
So I'll take the Vikings and stick with my original call on that guy, on that game.
The St. Louis Rams travel to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Rams last week falling to the Ravens in a game they really could have and probably should have won. The Cincinnati Bengals losing to the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona 34-31. 17 fourth-quarter points for the Bengals in there against a good Cardinals defense. Even though they lost, it's a step in the right direction. But the Bengals are suddenly on a 2-game losing streak, and the questions are starting to be asked. But fear not, folks, because they are indeed a pretty good team, to state the understated statement. Case Keenum listed as questionable right now with a concussion, so that means we probably might possibly see more Nick Foles. Either way, it doesn't matter. The Bengals defense is going to chew either one of them and spit them out. The St. Louis offense is a one-trick pony right now, and it goes through Todd Gurley Jr. And the Bengals, well, they give up about an even century a game, so they're 13th against the run. That will be good enough in this game. I'm going to take the Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals, I think, are going to stomp on the Rams in this game. I don't care who's under center. I mean, if you have a quarterback that can't throw for 2 TDs or potentially throw for 2 TDs against a really good defense, it spells doom everywhere. Todd Gurley's the only decent play for the Rams, and even then, I think he's a low top 10 RB1 this week. For the Bengals, I even against a tough Rams team, I think you got to view Andy Dalton in this one not as a top play. But, I would definitely keep him in the top 10, let's say outside the top 5. He's a player that will find a way to get the football to somebody to score, whether it be A.J. Green, who you're going to have to start, even if he's at a low wide receiver 1, or you make him a wide receiver 2, you're probably playing him this week. Tyler Eifert, a quintessential red zone target. Last week, Crockett Gilmore hit this same defense for 100 yards and 1 TD. So you can go ahead and get Tyler Eifert active. Certainly start the Bengals defense against whoever the quarterback is for the Rams. Where I would be sort of cautious is with Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill. Jeremy Hill, I have a hard time finding any reason to tell anybody to play him. because he's just a disappointment. I mean, that offense, I think, has moved on from him. And if they do ever sort of, focus in on him, who knows when it is. I mean, I can't even say it's when they're pulling away in a game. But Gio Bernard's an option, sort of a low-end RB2. And even he doesn't get me totally excited. But I think in this game he could do pretty well because the Rams do have a pretty stout rush defense. But I'm going to take the Bengals in what should be a very easy win for them.
The New Orleans Saints at the Houston Texans. The Saints sitting at 4-6. The Texans at 5-5. Brian Hoyer is listed as probable, coming back from his concussion, even though T.J. Yates played pretty well in his absence. Saints last week got trounced by the Redskins. I'm sorry, on November 15th. They were on a bye last week, 2 weeks ago. Trounced by the Redskins 47-14. Drew Brees, 19 of 28 for 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, but really the Saints had nothing going on. This is a garbage year for the Saints. Some real question marks about them. They're traveling to Houston. Houston's defense against the pass is 5th in the league. They're middle of the road as far as points allowed. The Saints can score. I don't think they're gonna do it very easily in Houston. I'm gonna take the Texans at home.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Texans too. And I'm looking for it real quick here. This is what intrigues me about the Texans right now is their defense. Mm-hmm. In the last 3 games, no one has thrown for over 185 yards against them. In the last 3 games, no one has rushed for over 90 yards against them. In the last 3 games, I think the average is maybe 15 points allowed per game. So, they're shutting down top wide receivers, whether it be A.J. Green, Kendall Wright, Brandon Marshall. They're playing teams tough. And, I give all the credit in the world to Drew Brees, but I think this is a game. They're coming out of their bye. Theoretically, they had 2 weeks to prepare. I like that a little bit better for their defense than their offense. But, if you have Brees, you've been going with him. But I think there's some better quarterbacks out there that you can play in this particular week who just have better matchups. And, for example, one of the top plays this week is Brian Hoyer from the Texans against the Saints pass defense that gives the most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. I think it's the most or top 5 fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. If the Texans had a tight end worth talking about, I'd say even start them too. But for me, you're starting Hoyer this week. You're starting, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins. You could look at Cecil Shorts or Nate Washington if you need to. And I like the Texans' defense. I would roll with the hot hand. Drew Brees, go find a better quarterback for this week. Go ahead and play Mark Ingram, but he's more of an RB2 this week. And then, Brandon Cooks and Willie Snead, wide receiver 3s. It's really hard to get gooey and happy for the Saints just, against a team like the Texans that, for whatever reason, they're rising up at a good time. And I think part of the reason is they have the incentive. The Colts are struggling, and they could actually win this division and go to the playoffs. Texans win.
All right, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Indianapolis Colts. The funny thing happened on the way to writing off the Buccaneers this year. And all of a sudden they're 5-5. And remember, we were writing off the Colts as well, and they're 5-5 as well with Matt Hasselbeck under center. Andrew Luck is still out with that lacerated kidney. Frank Gore is nicked, but it looks like he's going to play against the Buccaneers. But the Buccaneers' defense lately, in their running game, with the resurgence of the rebirth of Doug Martin, 235 yards on the ground for Doug Martin last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. And defense is the one thing the Eagles did kind of well going into that game.
Rush defense.
Yeah.
Rush defense.
So that's really not nothing. Jameis Winston continues to progress each week. Seems to play a little bit better and look a little bit more seasoned as time goes on. The Indianapolis Colts are 21st in the league in rushing defense and 29th in passing defense. And without that strong arm Andrew Luck, I know they're home and all, but the Buccaneers defense is very slowly turning into the really good Bears defenses Lovie Smith had in the middle of the 2000s, where they give up a bunch of yards, but they don't give up any scores, and they get takeaways. And it's starting to come together in the last 4 or 5 weeks for Tampa. I'm picking the Buccaneers on the road.
And I am too, Keith. They're sort of one of these few teams that we're talking about that the last few weeks, their defenses, which were horrible in the first 5 to 7 weeks of the season, have actually turned it around. Now the Buccaneers, their turnaround is only 2 weeks old, so I think that this is one of these games where I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts came out and won it, but I'm going to go with the Buccaneers because of how they've been playing, how Jameis Winston has been playing. Matt Hasselbeck, again, he's a 1 to 2 TD quarterback. Jameis Winston's more than that. He can throw for more than 2 TDs. And if they have a strong rushing game, which, it's hard to sit Doug Martin right now in fantasy football. This isn't, he's a top 10 play, despite whatever the matchup is this week. I think it's a average or better matchup against the Colts at least. So you're playing him. You're obviously playing Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson after what we saw last week. Looks like Austin Seferian-Jenkins is going to miss again. I wish that guy would get back on the field because then they would really be hot. I like their defense. You have to give them a go against a guy like Matt Hasselbeck. All the Colts playmakers. Frank Gore's an RB2. T.Y. Hilton, you keep him active as a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Dante Moncrief's become really risky. And one league I'm in, somebody cut him. And he's just sitting on waivers. I don't need him. I've got plenty of great receivers. I don't need Dante Moncrief and the luggage or the baggage that he brings. And even the bad teams are picking him up. I'm like, oh my God. So, it's hard to look at the Colts in fantasy. Certainly, it's hard to look at them the way you did last year. And for the Buccaneers, we've got a few viable players that you should have no problems playing them this week. They should get you some good fantasy points, maybe even have some upside. And then when you actually look at the reality and look at the real game going on the field, I gotta like the Buccaneers.
Jameis Winston. Okay, so if you take into account the last 4 weeks, so weeks 8, 9, 10, and 11, Jameis Winston has the third highest rate or percentage of passing yards in the air. So before the catch, he's at 67.9% of his yards come in the air.
Wow.
The only 2 quarterbacks with a higher rate than that are Cam Newton and Carson Palmer over that time.
He's a low in QB1. That I think says a lot.
And in that stretch, 15 drops by his receivers.
Wow, that's amazing. And what's amazing too is Mike Evans he's been one of the most highly targeted wide receivers.
Yeah.
And because of that, Vincent Jackson comes back from injury last week, and immediately what's he doing? He's getting balls and he's scoring.
Right.
So it's an offense that they've got a lot of weapons. Even Charles Sims was really active in the running, but more so the passing game. So, they're a tough team to defend, and I just can't see the Colts even at home beating these guys.
The San Diego Chargers travel to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Chargers sitting at 2-8, and the Jaguars at 4-6. And let me tell you something: if Mike McCoy's not saving boxes, he should be, because I don't see how he comes back. This team has gone off the rails. Sure, they've got their own laundry list of injuries, but you know what? This is beyond injury driven. This is just god awful. At home against division rivals Kansas City, they get blown out 33-3. And usually, like all the bad games the Chargers have had this year, they've been able to say, hey, but at least Phillip Rivers did well. Yeah, this time, not so much. 19 of 30, 178 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Now, obviously, it's not all his fault. He doesn't have a whole lot of it's not all his fault. He doesn't have a whole lot of weapons right now. Melvin Gordon has been a bust, and I don't know whether it's Melvin Gordon or just the fact that they can't block for him, or maybe the fact that Mike McCoy doesn't know how to use him. I don't know what the answer is there, but he has not lived up to expectations. The Jaguars, last Thursday, won an ugly game against Tennessee at home, outscoring Tennessee 10-0 in the fourth quarter. It ain't pretty, but Jacksonville is finding a way to win, and San Diego just can't seem to do it. So I'm going to pick Jacksonville to beat the Chargers at home.
I think after 2 disappointing losses for the Chargers, one of the Bears heading into the bye week, one of the Chiefs coming out of the bye week, this is a Chargers team on its heels, and I think it's going to be tough for them to travel literally cross country. Probably the furthest west you can go to the furthest east you can go in a straight line, and go to Jacksonville where their defense, it was the Titans, but they played well, and they played with some spirit. And I think it's a lot to ask of the Chargers when you've got a Jaguars team that can play better than what their record reflects. Certainly, they have an offense. The Chargers are giving up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs, which makes T.Y. Yeldon, unless you've got Doug Martin, Thomas Rawls, one of the studs that we've talked about, like Adrian Peterson. It's going to be hard to keep T.J. Yeldon off the fantasy gridiron this week against a team like the Chargers. It's going to be hard to keep Allen Robinson off the fantasy gridiron, hard to keep Allen Hurns off. Julius Thomas is actually a good play this week. He's around a top 5 play, so if you picked him up and sat on him and ran with somebody else, and this is the time you can look to him and I think get him in and reasonably respect him to score a touchdown this week. For the Chargers, Phillip Rivers is Phillip Rivers. He just hasn't been playing well. And he's been playing well because I quite frankly, I think it's because he's missing Keenan Allen. Steve Johnson's, he's picked it up a little bit, but he's no Keenan Allen. Antonio Gates now is his number 1 target, and all teams have to do is focus in on him. So he's not the top 5 tight end play right now in fantasy that he should be. He's still top 10, but just, there's certainly 5 to 6 other tight ends I would rather play ahead of him. Danny Woodhead is a continued, either a flex player or a very low RB2. And, a point you brought up, they're not using Melvin Gordon, right? And I think they're not using Melvin Gordon, right, because of Danny Woodhead. Danny Woodhead is a guy that, they open up a tiny little hole and he just fires right through it. Okay? Melvin Gordon isn't Danny Woodhead. And Melvin Gordon's got to run the football for a while. And you're going to have to get a couple yards in a gain, then a 6-yard gain, and another couple yards, then a 10-yard. And you're going to have to build sort of a game around him. And they're not willing to commit to that. And until they do, Melvin Gordon is going to be sort of a wasted spot on your fantasy football bench. So if you got a better player out there, go get him. In the meantime, I'm taking the Jaguars in this one, Keith.
All right, the Buffalo Bills travel to the Kansas City Chiefs. Both teams sitting at 5-5. The Bills losing a close game on the road in New England. A game that maybe they could have won had they been able to, do anything explosive offensively. And last week, like we just said, the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely destroyed the San Diego Chargers. Some question marks on the injury front. Charcandrick West is listed as questionable with a hamstring. So it remains to be seen whether he'll be ready to go. Spencer Ware figures to get the carries in his absence. He seemed to do pretty well last week. It's always hard. I'm sorry, did I say Spencer Ware? I'm going to make sure I said his name right. 11 rushes for
Spencer Ware. Yeah, that's right.
11 rushes for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. So if you were lucky like me and had Charcandrick West and were able to get Spencer Ware off the waiver wire, you should be sitting pretty, except for the fact that Buffalo's defense is Buffalo's defense. They defend the run pretty good. They're a top 10 defense there. So this game, though, I think the Chiefs, while they don't light the scoreboard up, they don't blow everybody's hair back with how they play, I think they're settling into a kind of I don't want to say grinding because that's not the kind of football they play, but they are who they are, and they go about their business, and they're probably going to win. They're not going to win. You can't really always bank on them every week, but they're probably going to win. And the Bills they need a spark from somebody on offense. I don't know who it is, what it's going to be. Maybe it's Tyrod Taylor. I don't understand. 20 of 36 for 233. No touchdowns, though, through the air. I know it's New England, but the Bills just seem to be lacking something lately on offense. I'm going to take the Chiefs at home.
Yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs, too. And, for the Bills, I think Tyrod Taylor started hot, and teams have. It was funny. John Gruden the other night on Monday Night Football called the rush of the Patriots the mush rush. In other words, they're rushing just enough to make him feel that he's under pressure, but not rushing so much that they overcommit and give him an opportunity to run behind the line and through the linebackers. So if he can't move the football with his legs, and they've got all the wide receivers covered, they're not moving the football, and that is a problem. The Chiefs, for their part, haven't allowed a team to score more than 18 points in the last 6 games. And they've played some pretty good offenses. Your boy Jay Cutler, Teddy Bridgewater, Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Stafford. Say what you will about Peyton Manning, but he's still Peyton Manning. And then last week, Phillip Rivers. No team has thrown for over 195 yards in the last 4 games, and no team has rushed for over 81 yards in the last 3 games. This is a Chiefs defense that's surging. In fantasy, I mean, I still see them out in several leagues and keep trying to find ways to pick them up, even if I have to drop my own defense and go get them, because they've got a really favorable schedule the rest of the way out. So if you need help, go get the Chiefs, and you could dump both defenses you're carrying and just stick with them. I think they'll be good for you. On offense, I think it'll be a low-scoring game. Spencer Ware's not a bad play because, running backs in that system for the Chiefs are sort of like Jamal Charles. They're the focus of the offense. They know how to block for that running back. They'll throw to him. They'll get his share of rushes, so he's still a good play. Top 10, top 12, something like that. So you keep him active and get him in there, and when Charcandrick West comes back, you do the same. Jeremy Maclin, a tougher play, probably sort of a wide receiver 3 as he's usually been. You're hoping that he gets a bunch of yards because he's not going to get a TD score. So there you go for that. And then Travis Kelce, I found a bunch of tight ends I would rather play ahead of him because the one thing the Bills did last week that was just amazing, they took Rob Gronkowski out of the game.
Yeah, they did.
I don't remember what his stats were, but I think it could have been as low as just 1 catch. He certainly didn't score. So, the Bills are going to put up a fight. I just think that somehow, some way, the Chiefs will be able to generate enough offense to pull out this game. I'll give the win over to the Chiefs. And Bills playmakers, LaShawn McCoy, he's probably a top 12, top 15 play. Throw Carlos Williams sort of as a borderline RB2. The wide receivers, maybe Sammy Watkins is a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Everybody else I would avoid, and I would definitely bench Charles Clay or just throw him back to waivers at this point.
All right, the Miami Dolphins travel to the New York Jets. The Dolphins are 4-6, the Jets 5-5 in this AFC East showdown. Look, their Dolphins lost 24-14 to the Cowboys last week. Yeah, Tony Romo back, a little rusty, but still was able to get it done. Ryan Tannehill, 188 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Lamar Miller unable to get on track, only 7 rushes though for 44 yards. The Dolphins are just this year. They're just There's nothing exciting about them at all. And the Jets, while they have fallen back to earth from the lofty air that we had them all in earlier in the season, I still think they have enough defense to win this game, a division game. I'm going to take the Jets at home.
Yeah, I think it's tough to go against the Jets too at home. I mean, the Dolphins, whatever air they had under their sails coming out of that bye week with the new head coach, has slowly been disappearing and dissipating. They're their own worst enemy with penalties and just not being able to get it done on the field. Now, that's not to say that the rest of the season they may not do something, because I looked at their schedule going ahead, and it's not too bad. So you may want to look at some of their playmakers in terms of a sort of a long-term commitment for your fantasy football playoffs. But in this particular game, I kind of shy away from him. I think Jarvis Landry could make some noise. I mean, he's going to pull Darrelle Revis, but just as we saw last week with DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, the guy can make plays, and even Darrelle Revis can have a bad game. So there's no reason why you can't play him, but I would treat him more as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Avoid Ryan Tannehill. Lamar Miller, this is a tough matchup. He's an RB2, sort of a risky one because the Jets' rush defense is pretty good. But they've also had a hard time lately too, and it could just be, given the age of the defense, that after half of a season they're just breaking down and slowing down a little bit. So you can still keep Miller in mind. For the Jets, Ryan Fitzpatrick is sort of an option. You probably have somebody better. I would probably bench him, but certainly Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, get them both active on fantasy gridirons, and Chris Ivory, a top 10 play against a Dolphins defense giving up 138 yards per game, second most in the league, and 8 TDs on the season. In fantasy parlance, that translates to third most fantasy points allowed to running backs. Chris Ivory, a must start this week.
The Oakland Raiders travel to the Tennessee Titans. The Raiders sitting at 4-6, and the Titans at 2-8. And for everything that Marcus Mariota has been, as far as being better than what everyone thought he would be in his rookie year, the Titans just haven't been able to put it together for a little bit for a couple of reasons. Number one, They just don't run the ball very well. They're 21st in the league, 98 yards per game, and part of that is while Antonio Andrews is supposedly entrenched as the starter, he doesn't blow anybody out of the water. David Cobb, coming back from injury, is now going to work his way into the rotation. So what does that tell you about how the coaching staff feels about Antonio Andrews? Don't worry, nobody will be around next year anyway. For the Raiders, a team on the rise. Everyone wants to say they're back. They're coming back. They're here. They've arrived. They go into Detroit and they lose 18-13, scoring all 13 points in the third quarter. Derek Carr only 13 of 25 for 169 yards. Seth Roberts leading the way with 2 on the receiving area for 54 yards, and Latavius Murray 13 rushes for only 28 yards and a touchdown. Just a god awful offensive performance. Tennessee plays pretty decent defense. They're not great. They're like, oh my God, I can't wait to watch this team. They're not that kind of team. And the Raiders defense, not so much. I'm going to pick the Titans at home to win this game.
The
pregnant pause.
Yeah, because this game, it was really hard for me to sort of pick, who do you pick between? Because I really think the Raiders are the better of the two teams overall. But these Titans, they do really have a tough defense. I think I'm going to go with the Titans too at home as well. It's a tough game for fantasy purposes. Like, for example, Antonio Andrews is actually not a bad play against a Raiders team that's giving up the 11th most fantasy points to the position, which is about 110 yards per game. The occasional rush TD, but then some receiving yards as well. So you can look at him as an RB2. Latavius Murray's not a bad play either, but I certainly have downgraded him a little bit based on what happened last week. So he's more of a low-end RB2 against the Titans team, giving up 110 yards rushing, almost a TD per game, and that's it. They're not going to give that much. They're not going to give anything more. So if Latavius Murray doesn't get to that century mark and score you a TD, you might be a little disappointed. I think you've got to still keep Marcus Mariota is not a bad play this week, but he's still more of, the Raiders defense has just been playing well. And so have the Titans. So, Amari Cooper, I think you have to play him because of his upside. Michael Crabtree because he's highly targeted. And then after that, looking around to try and, Derek Carr, I think, is QB2, Marcus Mariota, QB2. After those guys, there's just not much here. So, you know what, Keith, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to go with the Raiders in this one. Because I think they've got a little bit more firepower. They're a little bit more hungry right now. And I think that they're slightly the better team, but really it's a tough game to call. And for fantasy purposes, outside of Amari Cooper, I think you might get disappointed all the way around if you play anybody on either team. Oh, Delaney Walker must start this week.
The New York Giants go to the Washington Redskins. The Giants, last time we saw them, November 15th, losing in the last seconds to the New England Patriots, 27-26. The Redskins losing last week to the Carolina Panthers, 44-16, where they just got rolled in every aspect of the word there. The Redskins are one of those teams that, again, flies right under the radar because there's nothing exciting about them. There's no reason to watch them. The Giants have Odell Beckham Jr. They got Eli Manning. There's a reason to watch them. They're kind of the sexy pick, if you will. But the Redskins just don't really have anybody. Even Kirk Cousins yelling at the camera. Surprising stat on the Giants. I said the Carolina Panthers were plus 13 in takeaways. So are the Giants. And that's a little surprising to me. Going into Washington, it's a division game. It's going to be close. No one's going to run away with this game. The Redskins are actually 4-1 at home, so it's a good game. But the Giants don't play too bad on the road, and they are the better team. I'm going to take the Giants. Did we lose Jim?
No, I'm right here. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, then how can I hear it on my headphones and you can't? Oh, that's really a shame. I had you like that.
See.
Yeah. Anyway, look, this is going to be one of the highest scoring games of the week. the wild card in all this is I think the Redskins defense. Sometimes it shows up and you just kind of go, wow, these guys are really good. And then other times, like last week, I mean, they just look like a tire fire. So, but all things considered, you have to view it as a high-scoring game. A guy like Eli Manning is a top 5 play this week. Odell Beckham, top 5 play this week. You can even get Dwayne Harrison as a flex, I think. You can view Shane Vereen as sort of, boy, it'd be a low-end RB2. But, if you're in dire straits, he's a guy you could turn to if you need to. On the Redskins, Kirk Cousins makes for an outlier play. I mean, he's sort of borderline QB1 this week because the Giants are giving up the most yards to quarterbacks, 309 yards per game on the season and almost 2 pass TDs per week. And when Cousins ends up in these situations, he usually does well. That bodes well for Deshaun Jackson. It bodes well for Pierre Garçon. I think you view them as wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, respectively. Jordan Reed, an absolute must start. I know he's banged up with his knees, so you'll have to watch that. If he doesn't play, obviously move on to your backup. I even like the Giants' defense in this one because I don't know about you. If you in some of the leagues I'm in, the Giants are one of the better defenses, and they're just making plays. So Kirk Cousins is bound to make a mistake, and because I'm taking the Giants in this, and I think they're the better team, they're going to pour it on more than the Redskins could possibly ever, and it's because of their defense, which is what eventually should be the difference maker in this game. I'm taking the Giants.
You like that? You like that?
Oh, Kirk didn't like that.
The Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. This is one that doesn't need all that much analysis here, kids. The Arizona Cardinals are one of the better teams in the NFL and the NFC. The 49ers are going to be trotting out Blaine Gabbert, who, you know what, kids, hasn't looked all that bad. And the rumors have started to surface that the 49ers are going to shop Colin Kaepernick, which the 49ers have denied vehemently to the press. We'll see what happens there. Going on the road, being a division game, it doesn't really matter. There's nothing that the 49ers can throw at the Cardinals that will phase them. It's Arizona to win this.
Yeah, this is another game that should be really one-sided. You'd like to think that David Johnson and even Andre Ellington might be able to get some fantasy points for anybody out there that has them. But if you have to turn to play those guys, I mean, your season's probably been over for a couple weeks now. Roll out all your playmakers for the Cardinals. Carson Palmer's the top start this week. Chris Johnson is a top 12 start this week. Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, if he's healthy, get him active. If he's not, certainly John Brown, his value increases. And we saw what J.J. Nelson did last week. So I would start all these people with confidence, certainly the Cardinals defense. For the 49ers, you pretty much are not playing anybody except maybe for Sean Drone. Sean has been a pleasant surprise, especially in PPR leagues. He's usually putting up about 100 all-purpose yards, and he's getting 4 to 6 receptions. So, if you are in dire straits in that second running back position, I kind of like Drone, even in a tough matchup, because, quite frankly, somebody's going to move the football. Somebody. But take the Cardinals.
The Pittsburgh Steelers travel to the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks without Marshawn Lynch, but Thomas Rawls steps in, who ran for 209 yards on San Francisco last week and a touchdown as the Seahawks rolled to a 29-13 victory. The Steelers are on a bye week last week, but the last time we saw them, they were destroying the Cleveland Browns 32-9. Ben Roethlisberger, who didn't start that game, came in the first series or second series and still threw for 379 yards and 3 touchdowns. Martavis Bryant, 6 catches for 178 yards. And D'Angelo Williams was muted, 17 carries for 54 yards. So, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? Well, this is probably a game that you want to be in front of your TVs for, because I think this is going to be a real good game. Seattle, while they may not be the Legion of Boom anymore, they are still, pretty good on defense. They only give up 207 through the air per game, which is good for second. They have the 7th best scoring defense. The Steelers have the 5th best rushing defense, comparatively to the number 1 ranked rushing offense in Seattle. And they have the 5th rated scoring defense, the Steelers do. So this is going to be a real knock them in the face kind of game. one that fans should love to watch, and they do different things good. They match up. Their opposites match up in a weird kind of way. Running versus passing. I'm going to take the Seahawks only because they're at home, and East Coast team going to the West. That's a travel and a travel. What's the word? Load to carry. I'm going to take this. I'm going to take the Seahawks.
And I heard your hesitation there, Keith, because I know this is a close call.
It's a hard game.
It is a hard game. So I'm going to take the Steelers. I had the same difficult time getting through that as you did. But I like the Steelers matching up with the DBs for the Seahawks, and I think the Steelers wide receivers can dominate them. Antonio Brown, I mean, let's say he doesn't get in the end zone, he's going to get you 100 yards receiving. I mean, I honestly think that's how good of a receiver he is. And yes, he's going to be covered by the better defenders for the Seahawks, but Martavis Bryant's going to be out there. Darius Hayward-Bay is going to be out there. Not that you're going to play DHB, but I like Martavis Bryant as a wide receiver 3 this week with a whole lot of upside. Heath Miller should be active this week because the Seahawks, they do not defend the tight end position very well. Hopefully the Steelers recognize him and use him that way. D'Angelo Williams really has a tough matchup, but I don't know how you don't roll the guy out there as an RB1, RB2 because, this is Steelers offensive line. They can block. They can block, and he should be able to. I mean, you want him to get you 100 yards and hopefully touch the end zone. That's what you want out of D'Angelo Williams, and he is certainly a candidate for that. And I definitely love the Steelers' defense this week. The bottom line is the Seahawks are top 5 in most fantasy points allowed because Russell Wilson just keeps getting tagged. And as long as that keeps happening, you roll out a defense that's good like the Steelers, and you plug them in there, and you expect them to do well. They're another team that I like for the fantasy football playoffs and just going forward in general. For the Seahawks, Thomas Rawls, I mean, if he's not Marshawn Lynch II, I don't know who is. That guy is just phenomenal, and even though the Steelers have a tough rush defense, I wouldn't hesitate putting Thomas Rawls in as my RB1. I just think he is that good of a talent. And the better he plays, I think, the more the writing on the wall that Marshawn Lynch, I don't know that he'll be back next year, to be brutally honest. There's something to be said for making a lot of noise, finally getting paid, and then you're falling apart. So we'll see what happens. That'll be interesting. Jimmy Graham has a nice matchup this week. I don't know that he'll get a touchdown, but I think he's a surefire candidate for 80 to 100 yards. Doug Baldwin would easily make for a wide receiver 3. At the end of the day, we're talking about a medium scoring game at best. I'm going to take the Steelers. Oh, and don't play Russell Wilson. He's just. I mean, last week was a great game for him, but boy, for him to put two in a row, and in the second one being against the Steelers, I would really be surprised.
All right, the New England Patriots at the Denver Broncos. The 10-0 Patriots versus the 8-2 Broncos, who will start Brock Osweiler for the second straight week after Osweiler went 20 of 27 for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns against a Bears defense that everyone, including myself, thought would respond a hell of a lot better than they did. The Patriots beating the Bills at home 20-13 in a ugly game, really, for the Patriots. They looked out of sync, out of tune. But that's a game you win when you're a good team. It wasn't pretty, and don't even talk to me about the refs making the wrong call at the end because they didn't get a chance for a Hail Mary. The play's got like an 8% success rate, so just stop whining about it. Anyway, back to my point, that a division game like that where you're not clicking and you still find a way to win, that's what good teams do. The Broncos, on the other hand, showed that they still have the first-ranked defense in the league, the best defense, maybe not first-ranked, but best defense in the league. And they were all over the Bears last week. So this is probably the game of the week here to watch here, because even though it's Brock Osweiler's Denver Broncos, they're not going to give him more than he can chew, and it's going to be interesting to watch the Patriots give him different looks, change this, change that, try to confuse him. But they're at home, and Denver's defense is not scared of anybody. And so I am going to pick the Broncos to give the Patriots their first loss of the year.
Ooh, wow, that's really gutsy. Mm-hmm. I am not going to do that. I'm going to stick with the Patriots.
Based on their defense, though. It's not like Osweiler's.
No, and I appreciate that. I thought this was I could see how you could pick the Broncos in this, especially in Denver. At the end of the day, I look at this and I say, well, we've got Tom Brady. And I don't think he has to throw 2 TDs for them to beat the Broncos. But if Brock Osweiler throws 2 TDs, then they'll definitely win. I would say if I saw him, once he threw his second TD in the game, I'd say game's over. They win. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be really hard fought. I think the edge goes to the Patriots defense over Brock Osweiler. I think they're going to do exactly what you said, throw his looks, do some things to confuse him, make some mistakes. He's still very sack prone. It wasn't like the Bears. They rolled out there and they played these guys tough. And that's the Bears defense. And I think the Patriots can do as much, but on offense they're a little bit more versatile. They've got an all-around good passing, good rushing game. Certainly losing Danny Amendola hurts. I could view this as a low-scoring game. So for me, I've got about 9 quarterbacks I would rather start in fantasy as my QB1 than Tom Brady. You can go to the fantasygreek.com and check out our player rankings. They'll post a little bit later tonight and see who they are. I like LeGarrette Blount. Certainly we saw that the Bears could run on the Broncos defense. I think LeGarrette Blount can. It'll be interesting to see Rob Gronkowski. You can't bench him. You just can't, because the reality is he could break through just like DeAndre Hopkins did last week. So you keep him active. Brandon LaFell is going to be the number 1 wide receiver for this team, so you've got to fire him up and get him in there. And on the flip side, you go to the Broncos side, and Osweiler, he's a QB too. I wouldn't play him. Ronnie Hillman is the best bet amongst the running backs to make some noise. You can view him as an RB2. Demarius Thomas is a low-end wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 this week. Hopefully Emmanuel Sanders gets healthy. I think if he's healthy, that would make a huge difference for the offense in this particular game. It's a tough game. I'm taking the Patriots, but I definitely could see the Broncos pulling this one out.
All right, and the final game of the week, the Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. Matt Schaub versus Josh McCown. Somebody flex this game out of prime time. I don't care if it's possible or not. Somebody needs to spare us. The 3-7 Ravens, the 2-8 Browns. The Ravens losing Joe Flacco and Justin Forsett last week. Oh, God, this game is going to be so hard to watch and painful. Oh, jeez. I'm getting nauseous just thinking about it. Does it even bear, like what are we going to look at here? The points scored doesn't matter. We can look at the defenses, compare the defenses. The Ravens have a better scoring defense. They defend the run a lot better. So because of that and that alone, I'm going to pick the Ravens to win this game.
Oh, I'm going to take the Browns at home. This is why we're watching the game. The Cleveland fan base should actually see their team win for once. If I had to pick between Josh McCown to be my quarterback or Matt Schaub, I'm taking Josh McCown. He can easily put 2 to 3 TDs up on the Ravens. Their pass defense has struggled all season long. So view Josh McCown as a borderline QB1. If you have Matt Ryan, I would rather start Josh McCown. So go ahead and start him. Start Gary Barnidge. Travis Benjamin has a great matchup. The Ravens are giving up top 5 fantasy points to wide receivers. Duke Johnson would be the best running back to play, amongst the bunch. And I don't know if this week I would roll with him. I'd roll with him, but there's a bunch of running backs ahead of him. Again, you can check our rankings at thefantasygreek.com to see who they are. For the Ravens, Javorius Allen must play this week against a Browns rush defense, giving up top 10 fantasy points. I like Crockett Gilmore because I don't know who else he's going to throw the football to. Kamar Aiken could struggle. He's more of a wide receiver 3 this week. Certainly you can roll out both defenses. McCown is no stranger to throwing an interception, and I just look at Matt Schaub, and I don't know what we're going to get. If we get the quarterback we saw when he was with the Raiders, this Browns defense should just pummel him. View them as a low-end DST1 or a high-end DST2 this week. Keith, gobble, gobble.
Oh, God.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
That's what it's going to be like watching that game.
What I'd be more
Absolutely.
interested in doing with you, Keith, is in the future we need to do a promo where we actually throw some live turkeys out of a plane so we can all watch them fly.
With God as my witness, I thought turkeys could fly. This is such a great clip.
They can fly, can't they?
All right, we got 5 minutes left here on the program, so I got to ask you about my team here. I got an issue. I got
Oh, tell me, is it in our league or your other league?
my other league or my league. I got last receiver spot. It could be a wide receiver or a tight end, and I'm trying to choose between Jason Witten, Stephon Diggs, or Vernon Davis.
Stephon Diggs.
Even against Atlanta.
Yeah, I go like I told you. I think this is a game that I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to be forced to throw the football, and we saw what happened last week. I mean, I think Stephon Diggs will be just fine.
Okay. That's my conundrum.
Yeah, Vernon Davis, I'm not yet ready to believe in him. Last week, in our game reviews, we pointed out how both he and Owen Daniels, I mean, they were targeted the same amount. Or actually, Davis might have had 6 targets, but he hauled all 6 passes in. And Daniels had 5 targets. He had 4, each of them, 62 yards, 64. So he's worked his way into the offense. Now the question is, when's he going to pass him up, if ever? Because you can't live off Vernon Davis on 60 yards every week. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you, he'll score a TD this week against the Patriots. I mean, he could, but if he does, I'd be surprised. And then you view Jason Witten, and you can look at this matchup and say, I could play him. But, and here I have my sheet in front of me. The matchup is not the greatest. Panthers are giving up roughly, 7 fantasy points in non-PPR leagues to the position. I mean, if he gets 4 catches, that's 11 fantasy points in PPR. If that's what you want, that's what you can go get.
Right.
If you turn over and you look at the Falcons, yes, against wide receivers, they are top 5, 14 fantasy points to the position. But I ask you, Keith, who else on that team does Teddy Bridgewater throw the football to?
I know. It was the matchup with Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a close call between him and Jason Witten, but I would say that the higher upside goes to Diggs.
All right. So I got to start 2 running backs. All right. I have both Charkandrick West and Spencer Ware, so we'll just call them Kansas City running back. Okay. So I've got Kansas City running back Darren McFadden, Melvin Gordon, or D'Angelo Williams. I got to start 2.
I have my ranks put together, so we can just look at them right now. They'll be on the site in a little bit. Let's see who. Wait a minute.
I'm assuming McFadden.
Who did you say you had?
Kansas City running back Darren McFadden, Melvin Gordon, or D'Angelo Williams.
Oh, I haven't finished this. That's why. Well, that doesn't help you, does it? No.
Give me your gut.
All right, hang on. You got to repeat them again.
All right, so I'm assuming McFadden's a must start because of the Cowboys, even though he's going against Carolina. So,
Well, I can't say that he's a must-start, but go ahead.
Okay, so Kansas City running back, whoever it is, whoever starts, Darren McFadden, Melvin Gordon, and D'Angelo Williams.
Well, cut out Melvin Gordon. Don't even mention him ever again.
Okay.
D'Angelo Williams, Spencer Ware, Darren McFadden, and who else?
It's Charkandrick West. So.
Well, Charkandrick West is not going to play this week. I mean,
Okay.
there's just no way. He hasn't practiced. And, he's got a hamstring injury. Their best bet is to go with Spencer Ware. I would probably go, boy, that is tough.
Yeah.
Man. Because there's certain things about all the matchups that I can't sit here and tell you that I am absolutely 100 confident of.
Right, because Kansas City's playing the Bills. You got the Cowboys against Carolina.
Yeah, and then you got D'Angelo Williams against Seahawks. I like Spencer Ware, if only because the Chiefs know how to use their running back. And then my gut is, I guess it's telling me you got to go with Darren McFadden.
Okay.
I'm going to have to adjust this.
Okay.
What I'm looking at right now. It's tough. Boy, that's tough.
Whew. I'm 7-4. I'm a game out of the division with 2 games to play. It's important.
Yeah, I know. They're all important. It's actually funny. This is an interesting week because there are some marquee players with really tough matchups, like Tom Brady, like the running D'Angelo Williams, Thomas Rawls, Adrian Peterson. I don't think his matchup against the Falcons is a slam dunk unless they get him involved in the passing game, which they don't really involve him in it. Hopefully they've looked at the tape and said, we should throw Adrian a few of these short passes. Maybe they'll be able to break a touchdown. Sort of like Ahmad Bradshaw did last week.
Right.
Because that's where they're getting killed. So, and for that reason, I have Adrian Peterson ranked very high this week. Very, very high. So we'll see what it turns out.
All right. And with that, we are done and out of time. This is the Thanksgiving edition of the Fantasy Greek Starts and Sits in 60 Minutes here on Late Night Sports Radio. We are here every Wednesday night during the regular season and in the off season at 11 p.m. usually Eastern time. You head over to thefantasygreek.com and get yourself hooked up with a Skybox access. That'll give you all the up-to-date inside information you need to win your league, not just be in your league. Good luck, and may the odds be forever in your favor.
Turn out the lights, the party's over.